Insurance Commissioner Jim Donelon blasts a bill that would let insurance companies raise rates without getting approval from the state insurance department.
As Sabrina Wilson reports, supporters think it will help attract more insurers to Louisiana.
It's what the industry is promoting all across America, which is absolute deregulation of insurance rates.
Insurance Commissioner Jim Donelon sounds off over legislation advancing in the state legislature. Donelon says House Bill 489 would strip away his authority and that of future insurance commissioners to approve rate hikes.
If we can't regulate rates, then frankly, that's a vital part, an essential part of making sure that insurance is affordable and available and fairly implemented.
The bill by Representative Mike Huvall and Senator Kirk Talbot awaits full House approval after sailing out of committee this week.
Insurers will not do business in Louisiana if they cannot charge the premiums they think they need. A free and competitive insurance market will regulate prices much better than bureaucratic government regulation.
Donelon partnered with Huvall and Talbot on some other bills, but not this one.
They would substitute the prior approval by the insurance commissioner with what's called use and file.
HB 489 will still allow the Commission of Insurance to disapprove filings that are unfairly discriminatory or violate Louisiana law.
After the fact, then the regulator could take them to court to undo what they have implemented.
So it would be a much more difficult process to reverse any rate hikes they put into effect if this becomes law?
That's correct. It's the second to worst bill in this session relative to property insurance.
And Donelon wants to make sure insurance companies recently given millions in state grants are actually writing new policies.
I'm hearing anecdotally from agents and consumers that they are saying they're not going to start writing new business until after the hurricane season. I am very unhappy about that, and we'll have some serious conversations with those companies.
Meanwhile, for Hurricane Ida victims who feel they weren't treated fairly by their insurance company, Donelon says time is running out to push back.
August 29th is the last day for policyholders to be able to protect their right to get full compensation by filing suit.
Or through a supplemental claim.
If they're not happy over the next 4 months, they should file a complaint with us.
Senator Talbot says he believes the bill to repeal the commissioner's ability to approve rates is something that is common in most states and has some merit and deserves discussion and debate. Representative Huvall didn't get back to me. Meanwhile, to file a complaint with the insurance department over Hurricane Ida claims, call 1-800-259-5300 or go to ldi.la.gov.